In today's video, I would like to pay tribute to the Chasing Dissent co-host known as John. Outspoken individual who likes to sometimes forcefully project his beliefs during a show. But all of that has to come to an end, John. I am, of course, talking in jest, but he lives in Scotland, and right now there is a new act which ironically came into force on April the 1st, that, no matter how you try and paint it, absolutely stifles freedom of speech and freedom of expression. It is, of course, their new Hate Crime Act. John did a live stream about it the night before I recorded this video, but it is far, far worse and more dystopian than I think even he could convey, because when you dig down into this thing and you start to see how you could end up charged with a crime under this thing, realistically, people can just make things up. They can just make things up about you. They can report you to the police for something they have completely made up. And as long as there is one single source, that person that made things up, you could find yourself charged with a crime. You might not have even said the thing that you are alleged to have said. You may not have done the thing that you are alleged to have done, but you could find yourself charged with a crime. Maybe it's not going to be used to that extent. Maybe it doesn't go that far. Looking at the meat of this thing, it is quite disturbing, to say the least. Now, am I advocating that people be hateful towards one another? Absolutely not, okay? First and foremost, I think, yes, we can criticize one another. Hell, we can call each other names. We should be able to do that. To be outright hateful based upon an immutable characteristic, I disagree with that. I don't think people should do that. But then at the same time, if people do that, I don't think that expressing an opinion against that thing should fall to the point of a crime. Should fall to the point where you could find yourself losing your liberty and losing your freedom. I mean, Hamza Yusuf himself has fallen foul of this law that he has enacted when he stood up in the Scottish Parliament and gave a speech deriding people simply because they are white. Am I saying he shouldn't have done that? I'm not going to tell someone what they should or shouldn't do, but I will say that I think that the speech in itself was quite disgraceful. Should we say that? Same as I would say the same thing about somebody deriding a bunch of people or people in position simply because of them being any other race or skin colour. But when we dig down into this thing, people like John could find himself on, not just John, but people have already tried to get Hamza Yusuf done under this thing, and whilst it is funny, if they were to actually pursue it and charge him with a crime over it, I would be one of the first people to stand up and say, no, that's wrong. Yeah, he said and did stuff that is probably quite hateful and bigoted, but I do not think that he should be charged with a crime for doing that. Same as I don't think comedians, Mark Meekham, Count Dankula, Scottish comedian, I don't think he should ever have been charged with a crime for the very clear joke that he made. But as with this Scottish hate crime law, in that case, despite the fact that he stated that there were no racist or hateful or anti-Jewish undertones in what he said, the judge disregarded all of that and said, no, I know what you were really thinking. And that's what this Scottish law allows Police Scotland and the sheriffs and the courts to do. It allows them to disregard any intent you may have from the things you may say and say, even though you were very clearly not meaning it from this point of view, and you may well have spelt out exhaustively exactly what you meant, and it wasn't coming from a place of hate, you actually are an absolute racist bigot, and you need to be punished because we know what you were thinking better than you do. And that in itself, that's true dystopian madness. I don't think that this hate crime bill in Scotland will last. I don't think it can last. I could well be wrong. I could well be wrong. But honestly, I just don't think it can last. I saw people like India Willoughby chomping at the bit, salivating. Not just India, but India's fans as well. We can get Joanne Rowling done now. She can be done for all of the stuff that she says, all of the tweets that she makes. Police Scotland have already come out and said, no, Joanne Rowling is not going to be arrested over the tweets that she makes. So hopefully that same common sense can be applied across the board. I'm already seeing reports that there have been thousands, tens of thousands of hate crime reports since this law was enacted 2 days ago at the time of recording. Unfortunately, and it is unfortunately, it takes one single source. One single source. And that source doesn't even need to be on the receiving end of anything from you. That source just needs to be reasonably trustworthy or something along those lines, or a reasonable person. And then that source can say, I heard that person say this, and it was definitely from a place of hate, and that person can find the law coming down on them with a potential prison sentence of up to 7 years. How can anybody say that this doesn't threaten freedom of expression and freedom of speech? Because of course it does. Now, thankfully, from where I sit on Chasing Dissent, I don't find myself currently under this same draconian interpretation of a so-called hate crime law. And in fact, as a disabled person, I am specifically a protected characteristic within this hate crime law. And I wouldn't want to be. Put it that way. I wouldn't want to be. Because I don't want people being potentially charged with a crime for saying something negative about me for being disabled. As I said at the beginning of this video, I paid tribute to John because maybe he's going to have to just temper those opinions a bit. No, honestly, he should continue to speak his mind. And whilst I may not agree with everything he says, and whilst I may not like some of the things that he says, I'm big enough and ugly enough to have those conversations and accept that people say things that I don't like. The thing about free speech is, you do not defend free speech and you do not believe in free speech if you do not defend speech with which you disagree. The whole reason that protections of free speech exist are to defend the speech with which we disagree. And unfortunately, Scotland have absolutely jumped the goddamn shark on this. And I don't really know how it's been allowed to get this far.